Good afternoon. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada on June 30th, 2024. I'm pleased to be joined again by Laith Marouf. Laith is a broadcasting law expert, a geopolitical analyst, and the executive director of Free Palestine TV based in Lebanon. And he comes to us this evening from Beirut. Thank you very much for joining me again, Laith.
Thank you for having me, Dimitri. Always liked being with you.
We always seem to have fun conversations, Laith, although the subject matter is quite weighty and oftentimes very difficult. And we're going to plunge right into it again tonight on a note of levity, because after all, what can you do but smile and chuckle after the quite remarkable debate? And I think I'm being generous in calling it that on Thursday night between genocide Joe Biden and Donald Trump, otherwise known as the orangutan. And so these two individuals have been presented to the American public as the two serious alternatives for the next president of the United States at a very, very challenging time for the country and the world. And personally, Laith, I didn't find anything surprising about that debate. I guess if I was surprised about anything, it was that Donald Trump was a little more restrained than he typically is. And I think that probably was due to the format and a lot of preparation. But certainly Joe Biden's performance didn't surprise me in the slightest, because it was entirely consistent with what we've witnessed from Joe Biden over the last several years, and especially over the last 12 months, which is to say, mental incompetence. Let's be blunt about that. So there was nothing surprising about that. And in fact, as soon as the debate ended, I know you and I have both watched it in full, and I thought to myself, it could have been worse. It was a sorry, pathetic spectacle, but it could have been worse. And then I started going to all the major liberal media outlets to see what they were saying, and they were universal in calling for Joe Biden's replacement and expressing shock and horror at his performance, which, as I said, was entirely predictable. And before I ask you your reaction to all this, I just want to read an excerpt from a Guardian article. And the Guardian is certainly one of the major liberal media organizations in the West that has been implacably supportive of Joe Biden during his presidency and extremely critical of Donald Trump, so much so that Donald Trump has dominated the headlines in The Guardian, even during the last 8 months of genocide in Palestine. The genocide in Palestine had to take a backseat to The Guardian attacking Donald Trump again and again. And here's what The Guardian published yesterday. I'm quoting: amid a howling chorus of derision over Joe Biden's substandard debate performance against Donald Trump, one voice seemed to resonate more powerfully than others. At 6:15 p.m. on Friday, and that's less than 24 hours after the debate ended, The Guardian notes, roughly 19 hours after the two presidential candidates left the stage in Atlanta, the verdict of the New York Times editorial board dropped online to the newspaper's subscribers. The judgment was devastating. Again, I'm quoting The Guardian. The U.S. president, the board forcefully argued, had presented such an alarming spectacle of aged frailty that the best thing he could do now for the country he had served for more than half a century was to withdraw from the race and allow his Democratic Party to choose another candidate. Quote, but the greatest public service Mr. Biden can now perform is to announce that he will not continue to run for re-election, the New York Times editorial board intoned. Now, Laith, this reminded me when I read this of an exchange you and I had in our last conversation, where we were talking about how the presidential election might affect the politics of the U.S. government support for Israel in the genocide. And I put to you, sort of as a devil's advocate, the proposition that Genocide Joe's administration would be so concerned about re-election and the loss of support from the many people in the Democratic Party base who are supportive of Palestinians, that they would perhaps finally pull the plug on the genocide in the months leading up to the election. And you came back and you said to me, and frankly, I found it persuasive, that this is all just theater. And in fact, when when we talk about the Democrats being worried that Trump is going to win and Trump might try to exact vengeance on the Democrats, it's all just a spectacle. So with that, those words were resonating in my mind as I read this article. I watched the reactions. The New York Times editorial board wouldn't even wait 24 hours to denounce Donald Trump. And this was the universal reaction of all the mainstream liberal media. I saw the same thing on MSNBC within minutes of the end of the presidential debate. They were calling for Joe Biden's replacement. CNN, same thing. The Guardian itself was doing this. And the whole impression I came away with was that this was orchestrated, that they knew he was likely to bomb in the debate because he had been revealing his intellectual frailty to the whole world for months, if not years. And there was a plan in place that they were going to call for him to be replaced. And I'm going to propose to you, I want to get your reaction first, why I think this is orchestrated. But first of all, what do you think? Do you believe that they kind of spontaneously came to the conclusion after watching Joe Biden fumble and mumble and stumble for 90 some minutes that he was mentally incapable to be the president? Or do you think as well that this was orchestrated? And if so, why?
I think you're 100% correct when you presume that this was all orchestrated. And I tell you what, I was having a discussion with my 15-year-old daughter, around lunchtime today about the presidential debate. And, she was talking about how everything is. This is a 15-year-old American citizen, Canadian citizen, Syrian citizen, Palestinian citizen, my daughter, okay? And she's saying, this is all, theatrics, it's all show and all of that. And when we were discussing it, she recognized as a 15-year-old something that the majority of even critics on what is supposed to be the left or the anti-imperialist crowd are missing when they are discussing the issue of this, presidential debate. Not only are they all missing the point and talking about, oh, how we all knew that he was senile and had his dementia before, and it's only the arrogance of the Democrats that led to them doing this, when in reality, if you actually believe that it's all theatrics, like the majority of this crowd of the anti-imperialist or leftist, or what I call leftovers, believe, then you should carry on with that same analysis that you started with when you're complaining about CNN's control of the narrative of the debate and the questions and whatever, and not being able for anybody to do commentary on it online and so on, to carry it to the end instead of getting distracted by what was put forward in front of you as a distraction by the elite that control both Biden and Trump. They purposefully put him there to get humiliated so Trump can win. They wanted this to happen. It is the moment right now the United States needs a blunt instrument, okay, to fight its imperialist war. What was missed from all of the majority of this analysis, of course, is the fact that both Trump and Biden were debating on who is more pro-Israel. Trump said that Israel should be let loose and allowed to, finish the job. And he used the word Palestinian as a slur. He called Biden a bad Palestinian, like saying he's a bad Jew, or a bad N-word, right? This is what they were. This is the crux of the discussion. And so truly, my 15-year-old understood that having Biden on this stage was all orchestrated. His humiliation, his exposure, the humiliation of the whole Democrats. It's their own media that created this humiliation. They created this platform of calling a debate months ahead of the usual debate time. We're supposed to have debates in September, October, not now. Why now, if not for this? And
I have an alternate theory. So I want to get you, sorry to interrupt you. Why don't you go ahead? I just want to let you know I have an alternate theory and then I'm going to put it to you about why they orchestrated this, but go ahead. I cut you off.
Yes, yes. My theory is that they definitely want everybody to vote for Trump, just like they wanted everybody to vote for Trump after Obama. And then they wanted everybody to vote for, it's a game. It's a game of a distraction. And it's the same owners behind all these politicians, as George Carlin would, in his comedic skits would tell you. It's the same owners. And you're not in that club.
We're damn sure not in that club. So that is undeniable. So I just want everybody to know before I put to Lath my theory about why they orchestrated this farce, that I had no idea what Lath was going to say. Lath and I did not consult. I sent him the Guardian article, asked him to read it, just confirmed he'd watched the debate, but I didn't know what he was going to say. And this is the first time I'm hearing any of this, just as it's the first time he's hearing from me how I interpret all this stuff. But I have a different interpretation of why they orchestrated this debacle. And I'm not sure that yours is inconsistent with mine. There may be a certain overlap between them, but hear me out and let me know what you think. So I think what happened was, by the time we got to, last year, at some point in the fall, I guess, maybe before then, the Democratic Party elite decided that they were going to eliminate any possibility of there being a contested nomination. They were going to roll out the red carpet for Genocide Joe. But at the time they did that, circumstances were quite different. First of all, when they made that decision, this genocidal, sadistic, diabolical, satanic rampage in occupied Palestine had not begun. And secondly, it wasn't entirely clear at that stage that Ukraine was going to get completely annihilated. Its army was going to get eviscerated. And arguably, even before the election happens, Ukraine's military will completely collapse. Then, over the course of the last 8 months, the genocide unfolded. Of course, we came to know Joe Biden as Genocide Joe with complete justification. The utterly humiliating nature of the battlefield conditions in Ukraine became undeniable. Joe Biden already had hanging over his head the humiliation in Afghanistan. That was truly an epic humiliation where 20 years of warfare, the entirety of NATO was defeated by an insurgent army that had Soviet-era small arms, and the Taliban came back into power within days of the United States fleeing the country with its tail between its legs. So now Biden already had that baggage. Now he has all of this additional baggage. And in order for them to avoid Trump getting elected, and you remember in the debate, Trump said, Ukraine's losing. Ukraine's losing very clearly, and continuing this war is, a crazy idea. It's sad. It's tragic. I'm going to bring it to an end. I don't believe that that's what the neocons want. I think the neocons are determined to fight to the last Ukrainian and are clinging to hope that they're going to be able to destabilize the Russian Federation and bring an end to Putin's governance in that country. So I think my impression is they still want Trump to lose. Yes, of course, he's much better than, let's say, a Jill Stein or a Bernie Sanders or a Cornel West. That's horrifying to them. They'd rather have Trump than any of those people. But they still don't want Trump. They want somebody like a Gavin Newsom. They would even take a Kamala Harris, somebody like that is eminently controllable and who doesn't carry the baggage and the taint and the humiliation of Joe Biden. So I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to swap in somebody who doesn't carry that baggage at the 11th hour, realizing that everything has gone to shit, complete shit. And the only hope they have of defeating Trump and maintaining the neocons, maintaining control, because Trump to them is a wild card. They don't feel they can control him. That's why they've done this. That's why they've orchestrated this. So that's my interpretation, but I find yours also entirely plausible. What do you think about all this, Lee?
I disagree with you there. You know why? Because that's presuming that Trump would do anything that the establishment doesn't want. Remember, he promised to withdraw from Syria and he didn't. He promised to free Assange and he didn't. And he will do that again and again. Okay. It's all a game. There's nothing that, Trump or Biden or any politician that will run that will say, that will be true. Everything is a lie. Everything is theatrics. And they're driving the voter that direction. And there will be no difference in policy. And we saw, I mean, Biden came in. Did he put any policies that are different than Trump before him? On the contrary, he continued, for instance, on the border policy and arrests of and detention of children and so on, and immigration. Even on that field, how about the issue of abortion? Did he use his presidential? No, nothing. Everything that is all the main policies of government in the United States don't shift. There'll be, just cosmetic differences. And certainly, I am sure of it, even if Trump arrives, the difference is on which one to prioritize. Killing the Arabs and the Muslims, killing the Chinese, or killing the Russians. That's which one is the first in that order of the three. That's the only difference that could be, let's say, we can debate on, even if there is parts of the elite that argue between each other. It will be on the order, not the fact that they want to kill all Arabs and Muslims, not the fact that they want to genocide Russians, and not the fact that they want to destroy China, or genocide the Chinese people. These are state priorities for the maintenance of hegemony for the empire. And there's no way around it for anyone that comes into power. And this is why I think, unfortunately, everybody's again being played. Even the idea of like, oh, wow, we're going to vote for Jill Stein. Okay, what is going to happen? How many votes are you going to get for her or for Cornel West? Truth of the matter, the only thing that's going to change anything in the United States or Canada or the Europe is armed struggle. That's the truth. Anybody that tells me that a history of 80 years since the end of World War II, of elections after elections in the West, that somehow today something's going to change. By the way, the French are electing right now, and they're going to elect the Nazis, Le Pen and her parties, to power.
I just have to interject and say, I personally think Macron is a soft Nazi, but just to call me crazy, but that's what I think. I totally agree that
you're right.
And those people are Nazis. I totally agree. But
yes,
how
but you
different is
see
Macron?
why I was bringing it up the France elections is to show you actually how much things are pre-organized, how things are theatrical to the trim. Here is a man, Macron, who's in power. He has control of the parliament. He has everything. He doesn't need to call an election. Calls an election knowing that he's going to lose it, to allow the ultra-fascist to get elected. He was told by his masters, step down right now and call an election, because we need blunt objects that are openly, outright anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, fascist. We need them to be in power in most of the West, and that's what's happening. We will see that happen in the UK, by the way. We may see it, of course, happening in Canada.
Absolutely.
Masters.
No coincidence that they gave 2 standing ovations to a Nazi in Canada's parliament. I don't buy for 1 second that that was a coincidence, nor do I buy that it's a coincidence they repeatedly voted against resolutions at the UN condemning the glorification of Nazism. This was not a coincidence. It was not a coincidence that they were caught red-handed by the Ottawa Citizen arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Give me a goddamn break, man. These people are Nazis. We're dealing here with Nazism. It may be a soft and cuddly form of Nazism to the naked eye, but look at their policies. My God, how can you not come to that conclusion? Now, I just want to stop my tirade and go back to our predictions about what's going to happen. Okay, I still cling to my interpretation of events, although I find yours plausible. I just want to see where we have common ground. Do you believe that they are going to, in fact, swap Biden out for somebody? And if so, who do you think that clown is likely to be?
Yeah, so they're gonna swipe somebody, to what? They are gonna do it.
I
Okay,
agree.
but
I totally agree.
and part of the reason they want to do it is to create this panic. Nobody is gonna be trusting in the Democratic Party, and the mess that they're gonna create to appoint the replacement, which is going to be the most undemocratic possible way. They're gonna do it publicly. You'll see it. They are gonna do it in the most undemocratic public way, just to even add to the reason that people will vote for Trump. Okay. Because at least with the Republicans, this is what they're selling you. This is what the media is selling you. At least with the Republicans actually followed the will of the people. The people within the Republican Party want Trump, even though the whole Republican Party leadership doesn't want him. But at least this is the theatrics of what we are being played. And now we're going to be played this theatric of somebody just being parachuted in. And
Who do you
I've
think that's
been
going to be?
I mean, the names that the liberal media is putting forward, each one of them is worse than the other, which even makes me believe more in what I'm thinking.
Well, I'll tell you
Uh,
what, if it's Kamala Harris, I'm going to agree with you that they wanted to lose. There's
yeah,
no way that those people would put Kamala Harris to replace Biden if they were serious about trying to defeat Trump. There's just
yes,
so
yes.
that'll
So
be
it's
that'll be the clue for sure.
same thing that I've seen three women named Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama. I mean, this is a person
Oh
that
my God, Jesus.
that didn't run for any elected office in her life.
Right.
And the third one is bringing Hillary Clinton back.
Oh
So
wow.
these
I
are the
haven't seen that.
female names. And yes, I heard the governor of California, Newsom, but I mean, his reputation is so bad on an international level because of the homelessness and drug abuse and crime rates in California.
Property
So,
values, life has
yeah.
become unlivable for most people in California. It's completely out of control.
So any of
So
these options that we see them throwing are actually options for them to lose.
so there's this governor of Michigan. By the way, if they choose, in my opinion, the one who's least likely to win of those three that you mentioned is Hillary Clinton. I think she's like that. That's like the kiss of death, and rightly so. She's an absolute disgrace of a human being. Then Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama. She might have a shot. I think it's very unlikely, but so
But it would be perfect theater, that's for
that's
sure.
for sure. Absolutely. It would be nothing but entertaining to see that, and she's an impressive individual, but of course, like Barack, she's completely morally bankrupt and she's never shown herself to have any moral decency whatsoever, in my opinion. They're all at the top of the Democratic Party, a bunch of psychos. But anyways, we'll see. We'll see. I think that will be a very important clue. Whom do they choose to replace uh, Biden, Genocide Joe, who proved himself to be mentally incapable, years ago. So we'll come back to that subject once we know. And by the way, I just want to note before I move on to the next question, Laith, that Glenn Greenwald, somebody whom I respect a great deal, who he's absolutely convinced they're not going to swap out Joe Biden. I rarely disagree with Glenn, but on this, I have to say, I just think I understand why he has that view. His view is Biden is like pathologically committed to having power. He wanted his whole life to have this position. They're just not going to be able to remove him from that post, no matter what they do or say. Um, I personally, I agree with that assessment of Biden, but I think at the end of the day, he's much more malleable and manipulable than Glenn Greenwald might believe. We'll see. I mean, there are three possible outcomes, right? There's one, they choose a serious candidate who has a real possibility of defeating Trump. The second is they swap somebody in who has no hope of defeating Trump, and it's all just a kabuki theater again. And the third is Glenn Greenwald's alternative, which is they leave Trump and they leave Biden in place and hope for the best. We'll see. Anyways, I'd like to move on to, what's happening in your neck of the woods. And what I wanted to start with, Laith, is a very revealing tweet by former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. He called on Israelis on X, Twitter, not to leave Israel, which, according to him, is going through its most difficult time since 1948. And I'm quoting here: "We are in the most difficult period since the War of Independence." And by the way, it wasn't no war of independence. It was a war of colonization and apartheid and oppression. But let's go on. Change in the war, international boycotts, damage to deterrence, 120 Israelis in captivity, thousands of bereaved families, a deserted Galilee, thousands of evacuees. There's probably more, like hundreds of thousands at this stage. But anyways, ministers who only care about themselves, loss of control over the economy and the deficit. These are all his words. And after saying that he was very sad, quote unquote, to hear a software engineer he knew was moving to Europe, he said, talk about leaving the country. This must not happen. We need all the talent and dedication of the people of Israel just to get out of the pit and relaunch Israel. And then he said, but unequivocally, we are capable and we will get out of this pit. So twice he referred to this as a pit. Now, before I ask you to pontificate, Laith, on the meaning of all this, what this signifies to us, just for the benefit of our audience, tell us a little bit about Naftali Bennett and, especially the notorious role he played in the massacre in Qana in the south of Lebanon when he was a military commander. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, obviously he is California born, and at least his parents are. So he's clearly an American colonist in the land of Palestine. And the massacre in Qana, for those who don't know, in 1996, the Zionist military bombarded the United Nations shelters and location in Qana village in the south of Lebanon, where civilians were taking shelter. And they also killed United Nations workers and officers from the UN force there, but tens of Lebanese civilians were also massacred, and Naftali Bennett was part of the crew that took that decision and attacked the barracks of the United Nations and their shelters. So that's the background of Naftali Bennett. But looking at the tweet as you were reading it, I thought, oh my God, he is the best salesman for people to leave, actually. I mean, he listed everything bad possible to convince you to leave. I was like, what is he doing? He's like, maybe he should have listed one of those and said, please stay. But listing all of these.
Yeah, this is a demonstration of the principle, which I've articulated many times, that impunity makes people stupid. When you never pay the consequences of your errors and your depravity and your lies, then you just become incredibly reckless and stupid. And the stuff that comes out of your mouth is a nightmare for the very cause that you claim to want to advance. So I had the same reaction. To me, this is a former Israeli prime minister, somebody who served in the recent past, admitting that the situation is this dire. Is not a good sign, I would say, for the apartheid state. I imagine you concur.
Oh yes, definitely. It's very bad. There's some unofficial numbers that claim almost 2 million have left. Okay, the Zionist colony. So I don't want to take those as the numbers, but clearly at least 1 million have left. And you're talking 1 out of 7 colonists have already left. This is if we take the million number. Anybody that has dual citizenship, anyone that has a mobile job situation, like all the tech industry, anyone that has high degrees, doctors, so forth. There is now shortages of doctors, as we said last time, and we laughed about Canada being in a similar situation, but maybe now they're going to have all these Zionist doctors. So woes for the Canadian patients who are going to have genocidal doctors operate on them. This is one of the many indicators of the total collapse of the state of Israel And we're hearing many officials and former officials admit words just like we heard from Naftali Bennett. We even heard from former Mossad and chiefs of staff in the military talk about how Hezbollah will defeat Israel in 24 hours.
I'm Tomer was a senior Mossad official who made those statements. The Israeli President, Brigadier General Yitzhak Brick in the Jerusalem Post. We talked about that.
Yes, so you could see how this panic that is causing them to actually say some truths and sometimes not even notice what they're saying, how jarring the truth that's coming out of their mouth is, because we're all used to them lying and talking about the supremacy of Israel in every field. Suddenly, when you hear it from these individuals, you realize actually how much of a shock that they are living at the state of the Zionist colony and its performance on the battlefield, or its performance economically, or the fact that the colonists are abandoning the project and running away. That's a very good indicator of how deep right now this trauma and shock is of the reality setting in within the Zionist elite inside the colony are.
Yeah, there have been a number of reports in the last several days of significant casualties in Gaza. There was I think there was 6 or 7 soldiers killed across Gaza about 2 days ago. Then there was a commander of I think it was a sniper unit was killed, a captain. And then there was an ambush, I believe yesterday or the day before, in which 4 Israeli soldiers and 6 were killed reportedly, and 6 others were wounded, some of them seriously. It seems that there has been an escalation in the casualties that the Israeli military is suffering in Gaza over the past few weeks, and particularly the last few days. Is that your sense as well?
Yes, yes. I mean, in Free Palestine TV, we started translating all the videos of the operations for the various resistance groups as part of the Axis of Resistance. And we don't have somebody doing the work on Sundays, on Saturdays. And therefore, just looking at the fact that there was a backlog of 12 videos coming from the ground in Gaza that included videos that I haven't seen for a while, videos from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, videos from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, plus the Hamas and Islamic Jihad ones. So clearly those last 72 hours have been witnessed a lot of operations and a lot of ambushes that the Zionists fell into around the Rafah area and other areas in the south of the Gaza Strip. The battle is very intense, and the Zionists are losing big numbers of their troops. We watched in those videos that you mentioned the sniping of the sergeant for a sniper unit. So he's sniped by the sniper got sniped basically, and we saw videos of the destruction of the bulldozers coming in with and a tank and a Nimr APC, troops vehicle that moves troops, armored vehicle. At the same time, the last 48 hours saw a huge increase of operations in the West Bank, and that's somebody, most of people didn't notice this. There was across the whole West Bank, from the south all the way to the north, from Hebron, all the villages around Hebron, confrontations with Israeli military, attempts at invasions around Tulkarem, around Nablus, around Jenin, all of it was on fire for the last 72 hours, the West Bank. And a few hours ago, earlier today, the Zionists used Hellfire missiles on Tulkarem. They fired from F-16s, Hellfire missiles, and they're also using now suicide drones. They did that in Jenin also earlier today. So we're seeing a increase in the activities in the West Bank from the resistance. There's been at least 5, 6 ambushes in the last 3 days. Roadside bombs put as the approaching Zionist forces attempt to invade one of the villages or towns in the West Bank. So the Israelis are really worried. They're having to move some troops right now, a whole division into the West Bank to make up for the increase in activities, which is, that's 30,000 troops. They're already, they have shortages in the Israeli military, barely covering their activities in Gaza and in the front in Lebanon. And now they're going to be drawn into a battle in the West Bank. And I think the next few days are going to be crucial for that, as crucial as the possibility of increase in the hostilities with the border with Lebanon, and maybe it's gonna explode simultaneously. And I don't know how long the Zionist military will be able to stay together if the West Bank explodes at the same time as the border with Lebanon.
I was in Tulkarm as in the month of March, and having been there, I could tell you a couple of things. First of all, it's extremely densely populated. There are no there are no military facilities whatsoever to speak of. It's civilian infrastructure, very, very dense, and there are a lot of children in that camp at any given time in the streets. And that the people in that camp, yes, there are fighters in that camp who have the capacity maybe to produce some improvised explosive devices, and they have automatic weapons. But these are not people who have the ability to inflict any kind of significant damage on Israelis living within the borders of 1948 Israel. And so the only reason it seems to me that you would fire Hellfire missiles into Tulkarm refugee camp is because you are unwilling to take casualties by sending your soldiers in there. And secondly, you want to terrorize the civilian population of Tulkarm. I mean, I can't imagine any other reason that would possibly explain why Israel would do such a thing. To fire from fighter jets, Hellfire missiles into that camp is absolutely unconscionable. Unconscionable. But what we've come to expect from these psychopaths.
Yes, yes. I mean, look, clearly the axis of resistance has been smuggling weapons to the West Bank. Clearly also that the resistance in the West Bank has not taken the decision to use some of these weapons until it is relevant to the larger battle. So what we've up until now have seen is these roadside bombs and a few Katyushas being fired. And earlier today, there was an attack by a missile, a rocket, whatever, propelled grenade on an Israeli colony just around Jenin. And there was 2 attacks on main checkpoints into 1948 territories, one in the north of Jerusalem, one actually to the north of Tulkarm, a checkpoint that goes into the Galilee. So there is some coordination. Clearly, these activities are not isolated. There's something brewing. There's points being scored. There's messages being sent to the enemy with these activities. And of course, the enemy is sending their messages with the way that they are responding to that. But can you imagine how busy the Israeli Air Force will be having to cover all of the West Bank and Gaza and the border with Lebanon, trying to fight back people and bomb villages and cities? It is unsustainable. And we go back to the message of Bennett. There's a collapse. And the more they drag themselves into this war with more fronts, the faster their state is going to collapse.
You know, I know that you mentioned the smuggling of weapons into the camps. I know you have your ear to the ground because you spent many years there in Jordan. What do you think the current situation is vis-a-vis the stability of the Western-backed monarchy, autocracy in Jordan? Are you seeing signs that it is at serious risk of being toppled, or do you think it has a firm grip on power even now?
Well, it does have a firm grip, but that doesn't mean that the minute the fire starts in the region, that it can sustain itself. But currently, there is nobody ready for armed struggle, I think, on the grounds in Jordan. Although there is probably the Jordanian population is more armed than the American population. Everybody I know in the whole region, not only in Jordan, has 2, 3 guns in their house, machine guns and whatever. So Jordanian, and especially like in the countryside and the Bedouin population and so on, is even more armed. So in the case of things blowing up, the only way the regime can sustain itself is with the presence of the American troops directly, and that's why there is thousands of American troops, British troops, French troops, Dutch troops that are here on the ground in Jordan. You know, I think about it this way. You know, Jordan is as manufactured and fabricated as a state as is the Zionist colony. There is no such thing as a land called Jordan, for instance. There is the Jordan River. The east bank of the Jordan River is always has been part of the kind of the wider Damascus region, okay? And there is Palestine that actually existed as a land, as a name called, okay, this region south of the, Galilee was always called Palestine, but there was no region called Jordan. There is no people called Jordanian. Okay. The desert in Jordan is part of the Syrian desert. It's called, the Syrian desert. So the minute that the Zionist colony ceases to exist, or in a war of liberation, we already saw how the regime of Jordan shot down Iranian missiles when they were going to retaliate for the attack on the Iranian embassy in Damascus. So in the situation of a full-out war between Lebanon and the axis of resistance on one side versus the Zionists, where is the regime of Jordan gonna fall? It's gonna fall where it fell the same day when Iran was attacking the Zionist colony. It will stand with the Zionist. And that's going to make it into a target. And that's when we can talk about collapse of the regime. And definitely at the end after the liberation of Palestine, there will be no such thing as Jordan. There will be no such thing as Lebanon. There will be no such thing as Iraq. There will be no such thing as Syria as states. Psychos-Pico will disappear the minute Palestine is liberated.
And Leif, just for the benefit of those who don't know, could you just briefly explain what Psychos-Pico is?
So Psychos-Pico was the agreement between the French and the English that was written during World War I, that once the Ottoman military collapses in the Levant or the Greater Syria region, that they will come in and chop it up between themselves. And, they came and drew straight lines that crossed geography, natural regions, and, crossed subcultures, right? So made it impossible for the region to govern itself or sustain itself in those ways. And the creation of the Transjordan, or what became Jordan, was all to keep a buffer zone that will protect the Zionist colony. This was all part of the idea of creating the Jordan region as a country.
And finally, Leif, before we sign off, I just want to share with our audience, and I invite you to comment upon it. This was brought to my attention by a somebody I communicate with over social media yesterday. It was quite made quite an impression upon me. It was an October 11th, 2023 article published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, which is one of these, think tanks that is treated by the Western media as serious and weighty and a credible uh, analyst of geopolitics and blah, blah, blah. And the article was entitled The War in Gaza and the Death of the Two-State Solution. I'm going to read to you the first paragraph. You may have nothing to say. It kind of speaks for itself, but if you have anything you want to add, please do. And just before I read it to you, I just want to say to everybody, I'm going to put into the description of this video on YouTube links to the New York Times editorial and the Guardian article and to this piece, so you can read them if you want to. But this is the first paragraph of this October 11th, 2023 piece from somebody by the name of Anthony H. Cordesman, who's described as the former emeritus chair in strategy. And this is what he wrote. The outcome of the war in Gaza is already clear. Israel is so strong relative to Hamas that it can both defeat Hamas and establish almost any new security structure in Gaza that Israel wants. It does face limited threat from attacks by Palestinians in Israel and in the West Bank, but they are unlikely to rise above sporadic incidents of violence. In practice, Israel will be able to create almost any security structure in Gaza that it wants to limit Palestinian action in Israel and the West Bank to demonstrations and small acts of violence or terrorism. As for the rest of the Arab world, Israel does not seem to face any major direct military threat from its Arab neighbors. I could go on, but this was the prognostication 4 days after October 7th of somebody who is at the core of, what Ray McGovern calls the MICAMAC, the military, industrial, congressional, media. I never get this. It's a very complex acronym, but he's at the core of this elite. I just can't imagine somebody getting it more wrong. Any thoughts you want to add on this, Laith, before we close it out?
Yeah, I mean, supremacy is a hell of a drug, right? It blinds you completely to reality. And after a while, even when you start a lie yourself, and if it's repeated by everybody around you for years, you start believing it. Okay. So here have the Zionists have been repeating this lie that Israel and its military is the undefeatable military, that this is the epitome of Western technology and civilization. I mean, they made Americans themselves believe that that Israel is better than America. Okay, the amount of reference in popular culture to Israel and its advancement in movies and film and TV shows and music and whatever it is unnatural. And it's been repeated so much that the Americans themselves believe it. It's took now 9 months almost of video after video of the Palestinian resistance, the Yemeni resistance, the Lebanese resistance, showing us the Zionists getting the beating of a lifetime, the beating of a century, and all of the Western technology being humiliated on video after video on social media, for it to start sinking in the heads of people like Bennett and other Israeli leaders, that they're starting to wake up from their own delusional lies that they have repeated so often that they believe themselves. They're starting to wake up to it. It's too late. It's too late to save the Zionist colony right now, because even those who are waking up are not in power anymore. Those who are in power, like Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, Blinken, the deep state that we don't even see in the United States, that are puppeteering Biden and Trump for us, those people are still stuck in the bubble so deep, with one and over another bubble, over a bubble that keeps them protected from even thinking these thoughts, that they're not going to wake up. In fact, they're going to drag us into more and more war. And this humiliation of Western, prowess and military power is gonna maybe drag us into World War while they're sleeping, while their eyes are closed. They're gonna walk into World War.
Yeah, before we sign off, Laith, I don't know if you ever heard me say this, but many times over the past several years, when I heard words of despondency from people in the Palestinian solidarity movement, and by the way, I don't consider myself an optimist, nor do I consider myself a pessimist. I try to be faithful to the facts and the evidence and be a realist, at the same time aspiring for a better world. And what I said to them, I said from the bottom of my heart, and I meant it, and I think it's coming true, which is that the apartheid regime is a house of cards, and one day it will come crashing down with such swiftness that it will take our breath away. Personally, I believe we're witnessing the breathtaking collapse of the apartheid state, and hopefully that'll prove to be true. So with that, I'd like to sign off today. Thank you very much, Laith, for joining us. Until our next conversation, this is Laith Marouf coming from Beirut, Lebanon, and I'm coming to you from Montreal, Canada.